Hello everyone. In this video, I want to talk about security in Java projects and how Spring Boot can help us to improve the security, to manage um, vulnerabilities and dependencies, because you all might have faced the problem that you're running a security scanner which checks the dependencies and library you're using in your Java project, and you get these critical vulnerabilities and you have to update the dependencies, but that might be more tricky than you think, especially if you are on latest versions of Spring Boot and you have these indirect dependency issues. Well, that is a topic in the video today. My name is Elmar Brauch. I'm software developer and architect in Deutsche Telekom, and I give this presentation in Deutsche Telekom's Months of Security. And if you enjoy the content, please give me a thumb up and subscribe to my channel. Here I am in GitLab. A project of mine has been built. The security scanner has been executed, and we have a vulnerability report. The vulnerability report shows those findings as you see here, and we will look into one by example, and that is this critical finding about our Apache Tomcat. So you can click on this and then check the details for this vulnerability finding. Yeah, here again, you see the headline of the issue. You see a description explaining what is the background and what are the problems with this security vulnerability in our Apache Tomcat. You can also find categorization, the severity of this, how critical it is, and some more scoring and details. You find also a bunch of links, and you find where in your project the problem is located. Here in our case, it is inside the Maven configuration, but it could be also the Gradle configuration. Yeah, you will have the same issue independent of the build tool you are using. And if we look further, we find the problematic library. It is a Tomcat embedded core library in the version 10.1.34. And what can we do? We can do an upgrade to a newer version, and here you see the possible versions to do the upgrade. So let's copy the name of this dependency, which is vulnerable, and let's look into the code now, what we can do about it. Here you see now the Maven configuration of a very similar Spring Boot project. It's a little bit simplified, but it has exactly the same vulnerability. As you can see, we are running here on Spring Boot version 3.4.2. And IntelliJ is marking also some dependencies as problematic. But in order to figure out which is now exactly the problematic dependency, we are going to use the dependency analyzer. You find the dependency analyzer by clicking on this tab here, and then you see your dependencies in a different view. Yeah, we can see we have the Lombok dependency, Spring AI, Spring Boot DevTools, Spring Boot Starter Test, and Spring Boot Starter Web, but there is no Tomcat embedded core. How can we search now for it? Yeah, we have here a search field, and I can just paste the name Tomcat embedded core, and then this view here below zooms into the place where we have this problematic dependency. And you see, typically the Spring Boot starter dependencies contain other dependencies, which are like indirect dependencies, and they are also included in your project. So what can we do now about this problematic dependency where we have to update? In general, we have three options. Yeah, we could ignore it. That sounds like being a mistake, but in some cases that might be actually a good idea. So I will come back to this later. And then the two other options are we can update the particular affected dependency by just upgrading Tomcat embedded core, or we can do an upgrade of our Spring Boot version. Let's assume right now there is no newer Spring Boot version. Actually, there is, but you will face the same problem also if you are on the latest Spring Boot version, because the security scanners are also always developed. They find new vulnerabilities, and that might be the first time when the Spring Boot guys are informed about these new vulnerabilities, and then they have to think about how to upgrade this. So yeah, upgrading Spring Boot might be not always an option. And right now we make the assumption we have here a super critical issue and we cannot fix it by simply updating Spring Boot. So what can we do? Yeah, we can exclude this dependency. Then we switch to the text, and here you see now it is excluded. So if we would start our application now, we would have an issue because this dependency is missing, and that would be problematic. So we have to include it again by naming it explicitly as a dependency. So I copy this here and rename the exclusion, of course, to dependency. So we removed it from here and we defined it as a separate dependency. This, of course, still didn't fix our issue because now here we are using still the same version, which is defined by Spring Boot. So we define our own version, which is like fix version 10.1.35 because 34 had the issue and that was reported in our vulnerability report. Yeah, so this way is how you can fix it always. But what is the problem about this? The problem is by going down this road, our Maven configuration gets harder to maintain because now I have to maintain the version for this dependency. In general, I have one more dependency defined explicitly. Yeah, so the file got bigger. And I lose a bit the big benefit of Spring Boot. Yeah, the big benefit of Spring Boot is that you have a single version defined for Spring Boot, and then you get a list of all dependencies controlled and managed by Spring Boot and their particular versions. And that's why for all other dependencies we used here before, like here the Spring Boot DevTools or Lombok or Spring Boot starter test, we didn't need to specify the version because it comes with Spring Boot coming from the parent. But here when we go down this road, fixing it like this, we have to maintain versions, and that makes it harder to maintain. There's also another issue. Typically, the Spring Boot team is testing all dependencies and how they work together. And so they give you a set of different dependencies in particular versions and say this is tested together, and we call it Spring Boot version 3.4.2, for example. In the moment where I switch a dependency which is controlled by Spring Boot to a different version, I lose this kind of testing coverage, and then I'm responsible by myself to test and ensure that all dependencies I have so far are working nicely together with the patched one here. So be very careful about this because that is really one road to having a hard time to update in the future your dependencies if you start to define own dependencies with versions which could have been managed by Spring Boot for you. Yeah. So what is the best approach to upgrade to fix a vulnerability by upgrading a version? That is simply by upgrading Spring Boot. So let's check out how this works. I delete this dependency now. I remove also the exclusion. If we look again into the analyzer, we are at 10.1.34. I will re-import to ensure that this is correct. Yeah, we see it here, we have it. And how can we update it? By updating Spring Boot. Yeah, we simply go to a newer version of Spring Boot like this and reload the dependencies with Maven or by Gradle in case you are using Gradle. Then here you have also to re-import so that the screen is updated. And now you see we are at version 10.1.36. So they skipped the version 35, which we have been using before by doing this manual exclusion, and in the newer Spring Boot version, they upgraded then probably to the latest minor version of the Tomcat embedded core, and that's how they fixed it. And yeah, if we go this road, yeah, we can trust that Spring Boot tested this combination of dependencies which we have here. Just to give you an impression, I will remove the filter once, like this, and then you can see here the list of all dependencies which are part of this project. Some are explicit, that's why my POM file has been so short, but all others are implicit, and that's like a huge list. And that is like the big value of Spring Boot, that they are testing for us the combination of all these dependencies which we might need in real projects. Yeah, and last but not least, I talked about the option to ignore findings, in case that you are already running the latest Spring Boot version, and it's not possible to go to the latest Spring Boot version. Then you should really think twice whether you go by excluding the dependency and patching it manually by using an own dependency with a version, as I showed first, or whether you ignore the finding for now and fix it as soon as there is a newer Spring Boot version available which fixes this for you. Because I have seen several projects which are super hard to upgrade because developers have gone down this road by managing dependencies and versions on their own. So the upgrade to a newer version takes some days. If you let Spring Boot manage the stuff for you, in best case, it's just one line to update. This one here, where we have in general the Spring Boot version defined. Then you build your project, you rerun your unit tests and tests so that you ensure everything is still working fine, and then you are done. So that is really, from my point of view, the recommended way, and therefore sometimes I would wait before fixing something. So have a nice day and see you next time.